Happy Friday, ambitious readers. Welcome back to another edition of Reading Ambitiously, where every single week we bring you the most powerful ideas that are shaping our world. And last week, we had a lot of fun bringing you this big idea around the transition tax of having to go between the old world and the new world and what it means to ultimately use AI in more and more places of your lives. And so many of you wrote in to tell me how much you enjoyed that big idea and how you're having a similar experience yourselves. And many of you said, Jack, could you in your next edition bring more application and more practical advice on how to spend time in the new world? And so that's what we're going to do in this week's big idea that we're calling the new knowledge work. Well, on Saturday night, after my family went to bed and I had hit publish on Reading Ambitiously the prior day, I started to think to myself, how am I paying the transition tax? And I started to think about all the parts of what I do every single day and how living in that new world has led to so much automation of the most mundane and drudgerous parts of my job. And it reminded me of just hitting publish on this newsletter every single week. It's an incredible amount of effort that go into it. And we're on our 110th edition of Reading Ambitiously. And the newsletter over time has become more sophisticated. We've added more features. More recently, we added the video component to it. And it's just more and more work. However, I'm not talking about the creative process. That is by far the best part of this work. It is the part where I have the idea, the spark of creativity. I see how the dots get connected. I can't wait for my readers to experience the power of what I'm experiencing in the process of writing it. I mean, it's the best part of Reading Ambitiously. The part I'm thinking a lot about and where I'm paying the most transition tax is in the mundane. It's in the assembly and the manufacturing of a newsletter. And you might think that because I talk so much about AI, that all of that is automated. But the reality is that a huge part of it is very manual. And I'm talking about things like screenshotting the tweets because Substack is in a feud with X, or bolding and italicizing the right fields in the newsletter, or going and selecting the emojis for the best as rest, or making sure that the quotes are attributable, or that every single URL is not broken. Ultimately, all of that work every single week gets assembled into rich HTML that gets posted on Substack.com. And as you might imagine, that HTML is sensitive, and the smallest error can cause a degradation in your experience. So I'm putting a lot of effort into that. The central promise of AI is to give me the time back that is currently taking me every single week. And that's time I want back. But in order to get it, I have to do what I am calling or starting to think of as a new form of knowledge work. And the reason is that knowledge work has historically happened here in the altar of knowledge work, the operating system, the desktop, with your favorite folders and your favorite applications, whether it's Microsoft productivity tools like Office and Excel, or cloud versions of that like Google Sheets and Docs, or communication tools like Microsoft Outlook. Knowledge work moves here, and this is where it happens in the old world. In the new world, it happens here. And the new operating system is powered by intelligence, and you harness that intelligence to create rich and high quality output. And one such harness that I think is a really great example of how this all fits together is Anthropic's Claude Cowork. And I want to talk about the mosaic of capabilities that are in Cowork so that you can start to get familiar with the tools that you have as a knowledge worker now. Starting with the center of the user interface for Claude Cowork, which is entirely voice and text based. You interact exclusively through natural language with Claude Cowork. And while you're doing that, you select the model that you're going to work with. In this case, you are constrained to just Anthropic models like Opus and Sonnet. But in the future, I think you'll have a whole catalog of models, including open models, closed models, models that are large and models that are small. And you'll ultimately select the right model for the job. Now, on the right-hand side, I'll direct you to what is called connected systems. This is where you're bringing in critical data as context into the context window. It could be data from your email, like Microsoft Outlook. It could be Salesforce.com data. It could be data that lives in Excel spreadsheets or in Google Drive or in your favorite database. But through these connectors and through Model Context Protocol, or MCP, which is the standard for these connectors that we're using today, this data gets brought into the experience. There are other key components here like memory and plugins, but I think the most important component that you've got to get very familiar with as you embark on the new knowledge work is the skill. The skill is essentially a single unit of agentic automation. Think of skills as the onboarding documents for your AI agents. And if you can write a Google or a Microsoft doc, you can write a skill, because these are plain English instructions on how tasks should be completed and how your standards should be met when the AI starts to focus on those tasks. And skills are to the new world as applications were to the old world. Think about software that lives on your desktop today. Perhaps these days it's more and more accessible via the browser or software as a service. But ultimately you would buy software, you'd configure the menu structure, you'd set up the features, and then you would move the work by using those features. In the new world, a single unit of software is a skill. And I see a world where, ultimately these skills come together, they're compiled and are used together, they're version controlled, ultimately. And, it's clear to me that there probably will be some kind of app store here that is playing an important role, because I feel like I want to share these skills with my colleagues and share them with departments. And ultimately, there probably will be a way to do that for a fee or for a free. We'll see, but I feel like we're going to have an explosion of skills that we're all sharing with each other. And there's a very good example of this in practice, which is the announcement that Anthropic made about Claude for small business. I downloaded Claude for small business on Saturday night just to get a feel for what this was. And what it is really a catalog of skills. There are 15 skills here that are all designed around the workflows that a small business traditionally completes on a day, a week, a month. Their workflows like a Monday morning meeting stand-up, getting ready for tax prep season, getting ready to forecast cash and run payroll. There's skills that can help you create a sales and a marketing campaign. And once you download these skills, you install the plugin, which is managed by Anthropic and version controlled by Anthropic, meaning it will get better. You load them into Cowork, you load up PayPal and HubSpot and QuickBooks, and you're off to the races using a combination of skills and context to drive key outcomes. But you don't have to wait for a plugin or for an app store. You can get started writing skills right now. And so let me talk to you a little bit about how I've done that in Reading Ambitiously. And as I've written these skills, they've started to feel to me a lot like a periodic table. Each of them is discrete and does a very specific narrow thing, but together they can really do everything. And so I've written skills like a sweeping skill. Sweeping skill goes and monitors a Slack channel that is just a channel that I have with myself, where every single week I put in new content into that Slack channel, and via an MCP connector, the co-working agent will read that Slack channel and pull back the context. There is a drafting skill that will read that context and interpret that as either a best of the rest or a tweet that stopped my scroll or a chart that caught my eye, and it will, using my voice profile, start to draft up some talking points for why it matters. There's a fetching agent, this is a very cool one, that goes out and fetches the content itself on the internet. And if it doesn't have programmatic access to the content, it actually takes control of my browser and goes directly to the content. It's very, very cool. Ultimately, there's an assembly skill that understands the rich and sophisticated HTML that ultimately all of this needs to get compiled into for it to create the best experience for you when you see it in Substack or in your email. Now, what I have not done is build any skills that are taking away from the creative process. I'm telling you, that is the best part of this job, the ultimate expression of these ideas. And I don't want the AI to automate that. I might want help with the research. I might want help with the copy editing. I might want help with outlining, but I don't want help with ultimately expressing creativity, which is arguably one of the best parts of the human experience. And that's the central promise of AI. It's not to replace me, it's to give me the time back. It's to automate the mundane and the drudgerous parts of what I do. And the process of doing that is the new knowledge work. And it's a type of work that is uncomfortable at first because you have to think about for the first time how you actually do what you do. And you've got to think about writing it down in excruciating detail as if you were to onboard a new employee or employees to help you do it. And that expression or externalization of knowledge ultimately gets captured in a skill. And those skills become the procedures that AI uses to automate. And going through this process done right, you can construct the skills and your agents to take the most mundane, drudgerous parts of your job and have them done so that you can move to higher and higher value. And that is the most creative part of our jobs. And it's the best part of our jobs. So that's why it's worth paying the transition tax. And that's how I'm personally paying the transition tax. And I look forward to paying it with you every single week in Reading Ambitiously. It's my pleasure to be with you all. Please do take care of each other, and we'll see you again next week.